Naraka has quite a few characters. Each of these characters has 3 different skills and 3 different ultimates. Some abilities are inherently better than others, so every time you want to try out a new character, you might find yourself asking the question of, what abilities are best for blank? The Naraka Discord is a great place to ask questions like that, but it's not always the best way to get the fastest and most reliable answers. This video should hopefully act as the one-stop shop for any character you're wondering about. Just check out the timestamps and skip to whoever you need. Obviously, characters get buffed and nerfed or even reworked over time, so while I won't be able to keep the video up to date forever, the ability list in the description should always be updated. There are plenty of characters that I've hardly played, so I made sure to get input from some players much more knowledgeable and skilled than me, so the abilities I'll suggest running here are the consensus of many people, not just me. Shout out to Lucky Neffy, Dailder, Obo100, and Dunking Donuts for the help. I'll link their stuff in the description. In the end, it's not so black and white with abilities, and many of them will come down to personal preference. I'll run through the hero list from top to bottom, so stay tuned if you want to hear some reasoning behind each of the best abilities. But if you're just looking for a quick reference list to get you started, check the description. Starting out with the poster girl of Naraka, Viper Ning, where I'll explain the format for the rest of the characters. S stands for skill, and U stands for ultimate. I've color-coded each of the abilities, with green being the best, yellow being okay, and red meaning do not use. These are very general classifications, so take them with a grain of salt, but if you're a new player and have no idea what to pick, definitely try to go for those green abilities. Viper Ning is pretty straightforward. S2 is the strongest and most versatile since it provides that 8 seconds of silence, which is just better utility than the others. S1 got a significant buff to now have the gold focus property and can be used while under attack, but it's still not really worth using over S2. U3 is pretty compulsory for her in solos as well, just because the other two are so easily countered just by breaking line of sight, meaning that more often than not, you'll get 0 value out of your ultimate besides a temporary breather. The stun that U1 and U3 can get you is great, but if you never end up stunning anyone, it's not exactly doing much. U3 allows you to actually swing your weapon while it's active, banning all abilities and grappling, which makes it a good tool to help finish someone while they're trying to get away. It also gives you 40% damage reduction while active. Temulch has interesting skills in the way that they're all at least semi-usable, but the one that's the most reliable and scales the best with your own skill is S1. All of the skills begin with an iframe jump that can get you out of combos, then spawning 3 sand orbs around your shoulders that can deflect 1 ranged projectile each. Activating your S for a second time will launch the sand orb, and in the case of S1, you launch it in a direct and fast path, knocking the opponent up in the air for 3 seconds, allowing you to extend combos or initiate with a free focus attack. S2 is the slow tracking version of this, and while it's something that I do like using on occasion, it can't scale with practice in the same way that S1 can, since it's reacted to and countered much more easily. S3 is interesting since it does have the fast projectile speed, but it's not nearly as reliable as S1. U1 and U3 are both very usable, with U1 having a longer uptime, and U3 having the added benefit of spawning sand orbs upon crossing the boundary. They all provide the slowing effect when an enemy crosses the boundary, as well as block ranged attacks, but with U2 having the shorter uptime and worse utility, there's no reason to use it. I prefer U3 usually, but especially if you decide to use S3, make sure you're on U3. Matari's skills allow her to teleport in varying ways, with S2 being the strongest version. While S1 allows you to charge up your teleport to go further, S2 grants 2 unchargeable uses. That instant teleport is just far more useful, so the extra use is great. S3 is usable as well, but the attack boost is so short, and teleporting back to your initial position just isn't as versatile as having the individual teleports, not to mention the longer cooldown. All of her ultimates will turn you invisible, allowing you to backstab your opponent with your skill. That's another reason why S2 is so good, because the 2 teleports allow you to backstab more often. None of her ultimates are horrible, but U1 tends to be the best because it lasts the longest. U3 can be great for a more defensive playstyle since it allows you to heal upon dealing damage, which can certainly make the difference in some fights. U2 has a slightly longer uptime than U3, but with less reliable utility, it's not quite as good in most cases. Tarka Ji is honestly one of the most commonly misunderstood characters when it comes to his skills, since on paper it's not really clear why S2 isn't preferred over S1. I'm actually going to pass this on to the #1 EU Tarka player himself to explain this. Huge thank you to Dunking Donuts for being so generous with his time. He's one of the most knowledgeable players in the scene, and is also a blast to watch on Twitch, which I've linked down in the description, so please do go and give him a follow.
So, Tarka has 3 F abilities and 3 ultimates, just like every other character. Tarka's F1 is by far the most useful F in his kit. It's by far the best one out of all of them. F2 is the worst. So the difference between them, so F1 when hit, it allows you to go into a combo if you want. You can go into a light attack combo if they are light attackable. Or you can do a 0.9 blue focus release. Not only is it good for this, but it has a lower cooldown than F2. And also you're protected from ranged weapons, like ranged projectiles. So for example, if the bot were to shoot me, I wouldn't take damage. Like it would hit me and it would like stagger me within the F, but I won't take damage. It also applies burn, 22-second cooldown. If you sit in the F for the full 3 seconds, then it has a 19-second cooldown. If you have cooldown reduction, you can reduce that even further. It's a very strong ability. F2 has a 25-second cooldown. And then on top of all of this, 1, it doesn't protect you from ranged projectile damage. So if somebody shoots you when you're sitting in F2, then you will take damage. If somebody knows that you're playing F2 and sees it and recognizes it the moment you press it, they can just get a free headshot on you and you just take damage, and then what's the point of using it? You know, you're literally just standing still there for them to shoot you. What it does is nice, somewhat. So obviously this is nice. Obviously. Like, it gives you a reset. Of course it's good. It can be helpful. But the fact that, 1, it doesn't allow you to combo off of it, and 2, it's got a longer cooldown, and the fact that you take damage from ranged weapons from it while in it. So this is first stage. That was first stage, so it was just a knockback. Remember, this is tap dodgeable, so they can just dodge it. Okay. Hit me once more! Thank you. This is second stage. So it can be nice, but it has so many downsides. And if you're like what's the point? You know, like if I had F1, not only would I be protected from range, not only is the cooldown shorter, I'd be able to combo off of it, or just do damage like this. Definitely very useful. It's by far the more useful ability. Doesn't give you a reset, but it's not always necessary. Also, with your F1, you sit in it, someone hits you, they're gonna try and dodge it, so you can just dodge back, make space, reset, do something. You know, like it's still the more useful ability than F2. You know, by far. Fireball, obviously. Fireball used to be reasonably good. It used to be reasonably good before it got nerfed. The damage on it got nerfed pretty heavily on its like initial blast damage, and also all of Tarka's abilities, F1, F2, F3, V1, V2, V3, all of the sources of fire damage that he could inflict. So for example, you can punch somebody, or you can like the fire damage from a fireball. All of the damage of it got nerfed and cut in half. So that another thing was a nerf to fireball. V2 is the ultimate that allows you to, instead of your F going on cooldown, for you to be able to consume your ultimate energy. They removed one of these, so they made it before you could throw one more, so that's another nerf. V1 is typically the best one to go right now because it lasts the longest. It gives you extra stamina. V1 is just simply the more consistent one. And on top of all of this, since Tarka, especially in solos, in all game modes really, likes to take rage glyphs so that he can have his ult up the majority of the time, because Tarka depends a lot on its ultimate. If you're taking V1 that gives you extra stamina, then you have lots of stamina in your ult in V1 because of that. If you were to take V3 and take rage, then you'd lack stamina. The more stamina you have on Tarka, the better, because the more you can animation cancel, the more damage you can output. Like, I could do so much shit with this. But if I've got V3, then I'm gonna have less stamina overall and do less damage in general. You might say that why not, but the damage you get from V3 is more, but it's not. Extra 10% damage isn't enough. to make up for the damage that you would have been able to do, or the survivability that you would have potentially had with V1. The V1 is just quite simply the better version at this point.
Kurumi doesn't really see much use in solos at all, so I'm going to keep her description a bit brief. Her ideal abilities are S1 and U2. All of her skills will spawn a parasol that you can teleport to and knock back enemies, or you can choose to activate the alternate effect that comes with each ability. S2 is an attack buff, and S3 grants damage reduction. The skills have additional effects for your teammates, but in solos, the self-heal that comes with S1 is about all it's worth. U2 is similar to U1, but instead of regenning health, you regen armor, and you also get a persistent debuff cleansing effect every 1.5 seconds. Outside of S1 and U2, her abilities just aren't really worth picking. Moving on. Tianhai is another character that's really just not great in solo, but some of his abilities are definitely still better than others. Each skill at least has some merit, with S1 being able to be used while under attack, S2 being able to essentially parry, and S3 having potential to start or extend combos. All are okay, but I would definitely say if you're a new player, the fact that S1 can be used while under attack to interrupt combos will likely make it the best and safest choice. His ultimate will transform you into the Vajra, giving you a grab and stomp attack, along with a renewed enlarged health bar. U3 comes with the extra benefit of healing you upon a successful grab and smash, but it has the caveat of granting the Vajra weak points, which people can target to melt your health bar with a ranged weapon. U2 also has the weak points, but with the capability to heal teammates, making it pretty useless in solo. V1 has no extra effect, but it doesn't have the weak points, making it definitely the best one for solo. Yoto Hime is fantastic in solos with some very potent abilities. I wouldn't say any of them are bad, but some do stand out more than others. S3 in particular is insanely strong, however its duration was recently nerfed, so while it's not quite as good as it was, it's still no joke. It blocks all ranged and melee attacks, and can even be used while under attack. This literally gives you the option to just pop the ability and stand inside the blades in safety while you heal. Great area denial in small spaces, extremely safe, and usable at any time for defense or offense. S1 doesn't have the ability to block melee attacks like S3, but it gives you a really good element of mobility as well as aggression, which makes it really fun to use. It also has the benefit of resetting upon killing any enemy, which means there's no reason to not use it in every encounter. S2 doesn't have the strength of blocking melee attacks, or giving you the mobility and cooldown reset, so I'd call it the worst of the three, but it's hard to call it horrible. Yoto's ultimates are all very strong, letting you unleash 3 powerful slashes and even teleport around with an effect similar to her S1. All ultimates also heal upon dealing damage, with the extra benefit of U2 being larger heals. U1 has the advantage of absorbing nearby cairns for extra damage, while U3 grants you 3 additional slashes that can be chained together very fast, resulting in a crazy high damage potential ultimate. Those extra 3 slashes are much more difficult to dodge, making U3 easily the best of the bunch. Valda Cui has been on a bit of a roller coaster the last few months, falling off hard for a while, but she's still decent with the right abilities. All of her abilities revolve around CC of some kind, with S1 providing the longest and most reliable CC, as well as the potential for combo extension. Another bonus of S1 is that Valda can stand within an unprocced bubble to safely heal, that is, unless your opponent pulls out a ranged weapon. S3 has the benefit of being able to be used while under attack, making it a decent defensive option, but when compared to the versatility of S1, it's a solid tier below. S2 doesn't even really need to be discussed, it's the weakest of the 3, and it's just really easy to avoid. Her ultimates are all pretty different, with U1 affecting both you and the opponent, giving you the option to hurl a spear at them with damage that scales off the rarity of your weapon. U2 only affects the opponent, suspending them in the air for a full 9 seconds. This serves as a good reset since it lets you get off a lot of healing and or run away, but the startup is much slower than U1, which results in it being dodged quite often by good players. That makes U1 the far better choice in a high level tournament scene, while U2 is perfectly playable on normal ranked. U3 is pretty much only useful if the circle is small enough to limit the enemy's movement, but in most scenarios it's just too easy to avoid and isn't worth running. I'm not too familiar with Yueshan, since he's another one of those characters that doesn't get a lot of love in solos, but he shouldn't be too hard to go over anyways. S1 is generally considered to be the best because it can be used while under attack, where you can rush forwards with gold focus and break out of a combo. S2 deals a small amount of damage and stuns the enemy for 1 second. S3 has a knockback effect and reduces the enemy's attack, neither of which provide nearly the level of utility that the combo-breaking Gold Focus S1 does. In all forms of Yueshan's ultimate, he transforms into the Almighty General with 2 unique attacks replacing your typical light attacks. What differs between the ultimates is the skill while the ult is active. V1 lets you activate a thrust attack that will allow you to combo right into Dragon Tail without having to charge it, which is great. V2 does a bit of damage and some knockback, which isn't that great, and V3 provides the immovable effect, which grants immunity to some CC effects as well as damage reduction. I'd say V1 is the most versatile, but in the end, all of the ultimates provide similar reset potential and are all pretty easy to run away from. Chen can be really strong when played correctly, and a couple of his abilities definitely stand out over others. All of his skills will summon spirit blades with differing effects. The effect that stays the same throughout all of them is that while Chen has unused spirit blades, if he takes lethal damage, the remaining blades will be consumed and that damage will be negated. S1 will summon 5 blades that can be manually fired, each one of them being able to clash with focus and basic attacks, while also greatly reducing the durability of the enemy's weapon. You can even force them to drop their weapon if they clash with you after their weapon's durability drops to 0. S2 also has the benefit of being able to clash, but the blades can no longer be manually fired, and instead just fire every 3 seconds, which doesn't let you keep the blades around for that lethal damage protection. S3 is definitely the most useful despite it not having the ability to clash. What it does have is the ability to regen armor with each blade fired, as well as providing a shield that blocks ranged attacks. It's the most versatile of the abilities since you can almost never go wrong with healing. All of the ultimates have some sort of teleport involved, with U2 and U3 definitely being the best for most scenarios. U1 allows you to place a yin-yang orb, which you can then teleport to whenever you want, as long as it hasn't expired or you've gone too far away. U2 doesn't let you place an orb in advance like U1, but it lets you choose where to teleport right away, and if you place the portal on enemies, you swap places with them. It doesn't tell you in the description for some reason, but this ultimate will essentially negate anything your opponent is doing, even their own ultimate. It's a hugely powerful counter tool, and even has a faster startup than U1, making it a great choice. U3, while maybe not as good at tournament level, is plenty good enough for ranked solo, and what I'd probably call the more fun variant. You open up 2 portals that allow you to travel back and forth between them at the press of a button, granting you a small attack buff each time you port. It still has that reset potential, while having a bit of an aggressive flair to it too. Justina Gu has been right at the top of solos ever since her release really, and her abilities make it pretty obvious why. S1 and S2 are the skills that primarily get used, both of them encasing you in ice and negating damage while frozen. S2 can be used while under attack and activates instantly, lasting for up to 3 seconds, while S1 can't be used while under attack and has a short startup time, but it also heals you and lasts up to 4 seconds. At very high level play, S2 becomes the better choice most of the time, but for a newer player, the heal is great. S3 is kind of the awkward middle between the two, and basically turns out to be a less healing S1. Justina's U1 and U2 are very similar, both of them knocking back enemies on startup and changing her skill into a dash that can freeze enemies. U1 allows you to dash 3 times, while U2 only allows you to dash twice, but with the added benefit of the freeze being guaranteed. With the new hero Zipping Yin taking over the meta right now with her S2 ability that makes her immune to some forms of stun, Justina's U2 can bypass this, where U1 doesn't. U1 also can't freeze someone while they're charging focus, but it's still a great choice since those 3 dashes make it a versatile option for aggressing and escaping. U3 is a bit of a weird one, and I won't say that it's bad, but the freeze dashes are just a lot more versatile. Takeda has some really good skills, all of them centered around countering focus attacks. S1 allows you to enter a state in which all focus attacks will be automatically grabbed, disarming the opponent. This is obviously pretty nice, but a good player will simply recognize when you have the ability active and play around it. S2 and S3 are more proactive rather than retroactive, both of them allowing you to rush forward in an instant, disarming an opponent that is either charging or releasing a focus attack. S2 used to be the go-to skill because of its combo extension potential, but recently S3 is pretty much the king. It has lingering gold frames, which makes its activation very safe, and when paired with U1, it's an extremely deadly combo. S1 may seem like it's a great pick if you're a beginner and want more of a set and forget ability, and that's what I used to think, but this is a really good explanation from Dunking as to why it's not, so pause and give that a read if you're curious. S3 into U1 is one of the few things in the game that can TOD, while also both of them being pretty safe in their own ways. U1 is really versatile, allowing you to interrupt a parry punish and protect yourself from a lot of other things. It also lets you perform infinites and guarantee various attacks. It's just really powerful. U2 is the one you want to stay away from for the most part. It's much easier to avoid and not nearly as versatile without that instant demonic strike. And finally, Zipping Yin. If you've been playing a lot of solos recently, you probably know what makes her so good, and that's her ability to avoid stagger from non-focus attacks. The main thing responsible for this being her S2. You basically see nothing but S2 from Zippies. It allows her to get out of basically any situation for free just by popping it and grappling away, or you can stay aggressive and play in a pretty oppressive manner. It also heals you, so if you're dealing with a really good player, they'll be very difficult to kill as they run away and play off of the cooldown. S1 is just a raw heal, which normally is really good, but not when you're up against S2. S3 is more of a trios thing, if anything, totally inferior to S2. For her ultimates, I'd say U1 or U2 are the ones that you typically want to go for. They both provide Sedate Soul, which is the effect that negates fatal damage and gives you that knockback and heal. U1 allows Sedate Soul to proc while you're at 100% rage, making it very safe, but if you did choose to activate it instead of waiting to essentially die, you get the constant regen along with a 20% healing buff that affects your S2 as well as your basic healing items. U2 is pretty similar with a few key changes, one being that you don't have Sedate Soul while at 100% rage, but you do have it active after you manually initiate the ultimate. Sedate Soul will drain all of your rage when it procs with U1, but if it procs during U2, it won't drain any, which is nice. I still see U1 much more often than U2, so take that for what it's worth. I hardly ever see U3 in solos. It doesn't have Sedate Soul or that ever reliable regen, so it kinda pales in comparison. Alright, there we have it. All of the characters' best abilities summarized in one video, hopefully in a way that was easy to understand and not too convoluted. If you enjoyed the video, or if you want to see more informational stuff like this, I would be super grateful if you subscribed. Let me know if you do in the comments, and I'll be sure to thank you. Of course, feel free to ask any questions down below, and I'll see you next time.